What's up, my Shadowverse scholars, and welcome back to another Enverse Academy video. So, I want to apologize again. I can't get it right, guys. So, Aurelia 100% says select an enemy leader, and then you get those plus effects. I don't know what I was doing when I was recording really late last night, but 100% Aurelia does have that buff on it. But, forgive me, guys. I am human at the end of the day. I am going to mess up. But, just simple things like that. So at least I'm not butchering what Swordcraft does. But today we are talking about Forestcraft. Forestcraft is definitely the slept-on craft out of all of the other decks. But I'm going to let you know that the Forestcraft you do see at a tournament or whoever you play that's very skilled, that's going to be the deck that'll get you. So do not sleep on Forestcraft, and that's why we're going to talk about it today. So let us take a walk in the forest. So what Forestcraft does is it actually has tools for literally everything. It has the removal, it has the heal, it has potential board spam, it has tokens, and it has high end game, and potentially if you want to build it to it, it can have good early game, and it's always going to have pretty good, mid game too. And, Forestcraft is just going to have every tool that it needs. And that's one thing I like about Forestcraft, is because there's so much that you can do in one play. Like, I'm going to be drawing a whole bunch of cards, and then I'm like, alright, I have all these cards, and now I need to figure out what I'm going to do with them. So, the Forestcraft player is definitely going to take the extra time that they need, because they're not going to, it's not, brainless, like, I'm not going to say Abyss is brainless, but, Abyss has the turns where like, hey, if I have one drop in hand, I'm going to play it. If I have a 2-drop in hand, I'm playing it next turn. No, that's not how it is in Forest. I have all these 1-drops, I have tons of 2-drops, and then, the higher end cards. I have to make sure I maximize my plays with what I do with Forestcraft. So let's go ahead and get into the pros and cons of Forestcraft. So the pros and cons of Forestcraft is it has a very good hand size. The combo in it is very nice. It has tools, has a very strong late game, and it's very flexible to how you build it and how it can be played. Now, on the other hand, that there's too many paths. It has a crazy dragon counter. It's draw dependent, and then, the fact that it's tempo, with some cards not being able to, be in terms of strength as the same cards as your opponent does for tempo. But, it really depends on how you build Forestcraft. And that's the really thing about too many paths, because you can really, I can build to counter Abyss, or I can build to counter Dragons, but, my other matchups won't be too well. But the end game is just very strong, on the other hand, when it comes to your late game monsters and then, just finishing things off. But it's really hard to go against certain decks, and you have to figure out what play lines you need to do. So let us talk about the first features cards in Forestcraft, and that is fairies. So these are the fairy cards. Every single card in here generates fairies of some sort, either whether it be a wisp or just regular fairy tokens. And they're just little 1/1 guys. You just play these little 1/1s, and they're gonna sit there. They're either gonna sit in your EX area, or they're gonna sit in your battlefield, and they're just gonna be 1/1s. Now, on the other hand, there are cards that beef up the fairies, and we'll get into that next. So here are your fairy buffers. So these are I would say, the dumbbells for your fairies. These help beef up your fairies wherever they are. Be it Blessed Fairy Dancer, and sometimes a slept-on Woodland Refuge. That's a card that came out of the starter deck. It's not too good, because why would I pay 1 when I could just pay 2 and then buff everybody up? And then we have Titania's Sanctuary. So if you ever see this in a deck, just know that your opponent's going to be buffing up their fairies. They're going the fairy buff route. But, just because they're buffing up the fairies doesn't mean, hey, that's my only play. I'm going to focus on my tokens. No, that's 100% not what's going to happen. Because fairies Forestcraft is really built to, hey, I have a low game, and then I can do a really good mid game. Well, it depends on what build it is. It has a very good mid game, and then this late game is really what gets scary. So you're going to have to deal with these fairies, and the fact that Blessed Fairy Dancer buffs your fairies all the way in the back line is crazy, because they'll be coming out as like 3/3s, and that doesn't even count for you having Titania's Sanctuary already on the field. So that's the best part. And they're just going to be coming out very, very huge, and you can just keep cycling that through the early and mid game, honestly. Another thing that we need to look at for Forestcraft is that it has tons and tons of removal. And this is just, the Forestcraft cards in itself. So we have the Archer that's pinging one person one every time you play something. So if you go in the fairy route, every time you play something after you play Archer, you can ping it, and then the Evo pings 2 things for 1. We have Noble Fairy. Not everybody runs this, but it's still pretty good removal. The combo 3 selects an enemy follower in the field and turns it into a 1/1 fairy. So instead of a guy swinging for 5 or having whatever stats he is, if you did combo 3, you just summon a fairy. Now, we have Rose Gardener. That card's not usually played all the time because we have the new card that came out. But you can select the enemy follower in the field and return it to its owner's hand. You know, that's pretty good mid-game removal. If they play something very huge and have to play it again, that's pretty good. We have Robin Hood that deals 4, and then you can tap 1 and then tap himself and deal 4 damage again. And then we have Elfchild May, where you play her and then you select something on the field and then deal it 1 damage. But she has a second ability of when she's returned to your hand, you select the enemy follower and deal 1 damage again. So Elfchild May paired with Archer is very good. Now you're probably asking, hey Sparta, how in the world do I put Elfchild May back into my hand? Well, I'm going to let you know that there are bounce cards. So we have Nature's Guidance that selects a card on your field and bounce it back to your hand and you draw a card. And then you have Ancient Elf. You know, she gets a 1/1 if you return something to your hand, and then the Evo for 1, you can also return something in your hand and get a +1/+1. So that's pretty good in terms of the bounce cards. I forgot to put a bounce target, and that being Harvest Festival in this list. And basically, it's pretty good to help with the draw. So Harvest Festival into Nature's Guidance is actually a very good combo since you'll be drawing 2. And that's really the bounce cards for Forestcraft. So they really help you chain a combo into whatever you want to do. Because you can also put followers back in your hand, of course. But, I mean, you can put anything back in your hand. And these cards paired with Blessed Fairy Dancer, if you're going for the fairy spam route, that's very good. That's what you can do in the early turns, along with, you know, Harvest Festival. These bounce cards are just good. So let us talk about combo. So this new card, Crystalia Tia, has a combo 3 to summon a Crystalia Eve token, who's a 4/4 vanilla card and feels good. So combo abilities take effect if you played at least X cards that turn. So if I play 2 cards before I play Crystalia Tia, that being either, you know, a Nature's Guidance or any cards that I play, even tokens. So if I play 2 cards before that and then play Crystalia Tia, she's gonna have her combo 3 to play Crystalia Eve token. And then we can Evo her and we can give the Crystalia Eve a +1/+1 and rush. While we're talking about combo, let us talk about Rhino Roach. So I took Roach out of my build, which was honestly a mistake. But this card is very good in terms of you wanting to get some good damage out, or like, or you know, to even close out a game sometimes. So Rhino Roach comes out for 2, has Rush, and you can give this follower +X attack. X equals the number of cards you've played this turn. So that's including, you know, it's just right along with combo. All the cards you've done with combo go into Roach. So if I played, you know, 6 cards this turn, Rhino Roach becomes a 7/1. Now that's the only bad part, is that Rhino Roach will be a 7/1. He'll have 1 defense. But if you're swinging for 7, you know, who cares? Now on Evolve, you can choose one of the following effects. You can give this follower Storm, which, you know, if you're swinging for 7 or however many cards you played, you can swing and then swing at the leader immediately. You can select an enemy follower in the field and deal X damage. X equals the number of the follower's attack. So if he's a 7, he's going to be doing a 7, you know, damage to someone. So Rhino Roach is pretty good just for him being flexible of either being a Storm or something into hard removal. So he's pretty flexible. That's another thing that I'm talking about for Forestcraft, is that it's just so flexible. You have so many options into what you can build for Forestcraft, and it can either help you survive to the late game, or you can make it massively early/mid game. It's just, Forestcraft is so flexible. Now let us talk about the late game for Forestcraft. So we have Arya Fairy Princess that helps you put fairies into your field and your EX to fill up for this other card we're going to talk about. But the fact that you can put up to 9 is ridiculous. But, you know, I guess that really fills her, and then, you know, the field, and then 5 in the EX. And then we have Silverbolt. Now, this card isn't practical, but it's still usable. So you can spend 7 for a quick to select the enemy leader or enemy follower in the field, and then you draw a card and deal X damage, X being the number of cards in your hand. So if your opponent's, if your opponent's low on life, you can sure enough hit them with a quick bolt, deal X amount of damage to how many cards you have, with all the bouncing you've been doing. You should have a decent amount of hand size for Forestcraft. Or, that can be your game-ending play. You can really just burn them just for having so many cards in your hand. Like, I guess the max you can do is 8. The max you can do is 8. But, if they're sitting at like a low life and you want to hit them real good before their turn ends or before your turn starts, I guess. But it's not very practical, but it's still good. Next we have Rose Queen. You can select any number of pixie followers in your EX area and then become Thornburst. So Thornburst, so you can select an enemy leader or enemy follower on the field and deal 3 damage and you draw a card. So most Forestcraft decks are going to look to end the game with Rose Queen. Just from the simple burn. And, we love burn because that says, hey, I don't have to worry about you having a response for me dealing damage to you, because I'm going to hit you in the face with whatever I have in my EX area, and I'm going to benefit by drawing a card off of it. So I'm turning all my fairies that were in my EX areas into cards that I want in my hand and damage for you in the face or on follower on the field. So that's really good for these late game cards. So let us talk about the new cards that came out that I feel like are pretty good in the format right now. So the new cards being Elf Healer, Bolt, the White Wolf, and the Crystalia Lily. So Elf Healer, is pretty good, especially with the bounce cards, to heal 3 and then bounce and then, heal 3 again that next turn. Bolt to look for any pixie follower on the field or give any pixie token +2/+2. Oh, pixie follower +2/+2. And then we have White Wolf of Eldwood. Now I feel like this card would be a lot better if it had a sail, but the fact that he has Storm is still nice too. Well, Rush and a sail probably with what his ability is, but when his last words are, you look at the top 4 cards of your deck, and you may put a Forestcraft follower among them onto the field, but the remaining cards at the bottom of your deck in any order. So if you play this and then leave them open, and then swing into a dangerous guy that next turn, you can probably hit one of your late game cards and, play them for free, in fact. And that's pretty good in the late game, because you're going to be hitting those grind spots and you look at the top 4 and you're like, all right, so I can use this card and you can do it for free. So that's really the best part. And then we have Crystalia Lily. So this card is actually, I was sleeping on it at first, but then I found out what her evolve did because, I was still getting my cards together for set 2. And then I was just like, this card just puts anything on the bottom of the deck? It's like, this is so good. It's really a pretty good bell ringer. It's not as good as bell ringer, but she just gets rid of anything off the field. So she looks at the top 2 from the top of your deck and you reveal a Crystallian or a Pixie follower and add it to your hand. And I was really scared of running this card because, I had to look at the top 2, and then what if I missed and I saw something really good like a Rose Queen or, anything else that, like an Archer, that wouldn't feel, those targets don't feel good to put at the bottom of your deck. But, in terms of removal, the fact that Forestcraft only has it for turn 2 onwards, I mean, realistically, just getting rid of anything just feels good for tapping 2, and then tapping 2 again to evolve. It's not that bad. So let us talk about the game plan for Forestcraft. So, Forestcraft, they're going to be setting up. They're going to be setting up turns 1 through, however many they really need to set up. They're going to set up, but they're also going to be interacting with you at the same time, because they're going to have cards in their hand. They're like, hey, I'll take the early game damage, but I want you to know that your guys aren't going to be hitting me for long, because I'm going to have the removal that I need. I'm going to have the Ward, I'm going to have the Ancient Elf, I'm going to have the Blessed Fairy Dancer, I'm going to have these little guys that are going to be smacking you. And when we get into those turns 6, 7, 8, and 9, there's going to be my strongest plays. So I'm going to play an Arya to flood the board. I'm then going to play Rose Queen to turn those fairies into Thornburst, I'm going to burn you and pray that that's the end of the game, because, you know, dealing 15 to someone, I pray that the game's over. But if they're at 5, then, you know, Rose Queen can still swing for 7, or, you know, my Wolf is going to play my Rose Queen for free. So, you know, there's lots of plays that I can do. So just know that Forestcraft they're just going to be setting up really turns 3s and 4s and 5s. But on those first early turns, I'm going to focus on removing your things, or either buffing my fairies up, depending on which line of play the Forestcraft player is going to be playing, and whether the late game control build or the Tatiana Sanctuary, you know, fairies get buffed up and they're hitting the gym, and it's going to be crazy early and mid game. So you have to really watch out for what the Forestcraft player is doing. But don't throw away your game plan if you're going against Forestcraft. But Forestcraft, you know, make sure all your cards align with the stars, of course. To, you know, alright, so this play I'm going to draw. This play I'm going to get rid of this. This play, you know, just focus on what one thing you're going to do for that turn. And then, you know, pray that your opponent doesn't disrupt you too much. So let's talk about the tech options for Forestcraft. So I believe the Angelic Snipe is very good for the early game. I know Archer is already in the deck, because, you know, you should be running Archer to run through the smaller end of the decks. But you can't draw Archer every game. You can't draw Archer every game. It's not happening. So why don't we put in more options to help with the early game? So if you're weaker towards the early side, I'd run Angelic Snipes. Now, Surefire Bullet, I feel, should be in every deck, because what it does, it's a quick that does 3 to anything on 2, and I don't know what you're playing on 2 that's higher than, you know, 3 or 4, but hey, that's fine. But 2, just for the quick to deal 3, and then, you know, if they evolved it on, you know, turn 2 or turn 3, it's probably going to be 4 damage. I can't think of anything, but hey, drop your comments if you can think of any cards that on turn 2 turns into 5/5s, because I can't think of any. Now next, you guys are looking at me with your eyebrows curved a little, and that's okay. Now for the control build, you get to turns like 7 and 8, and if your opponent floods the field on 8, there's nothing I can think of in Forestcraft originally that just wipes the board entirely. Now Bahamut, on the other hand, just you play him for 9 and he wipes the field. And he's a 9/9. And that's the other thing. Forestcraft doesn't have like lots of late game stuff. We do have the Rose Queen and the Arya and the Silver Bolt. That's nice. But they're not wiping the board. So Bahamut gives us that big body that we need at the end of the game. And it also wipes the field. And it's not a 10 drop unlike, you know, Flaming Glass. But you can also make that combo, a 4? A 4, but it's not worth with all the clunkiness. Bahamut only takes up 1 spot, or, you know, 2 if you're feeling saucy, and then you only need to run the 1 Evo, because you're only going to play the 1 Bahamut, especially if they floored the board after a certain time. It's pretty good. And then we run the Execution just to, you know, have a straight, hey, I'm going to remove this card off the field. Very good against Swordcraft, very good against any deck realistically that's running a big boss monster that you can't reach up and damage in terms, but just to destroy anything on the field. Next, let's talk about the good matchups and the bad matchups. Alright, so here are your good matchups in the form of Runecraft, Havencraft, and Swordcraft. Now, Swordcraft is the harder matchup of the gooder matchups, but if you can get that Archer on the field and ping their bodies just for you playing certain things, then you've got it rolling. Now, when you get into the late game, you got to make sure you're making your swings count. You got to make sure when you get to your burn turn that, you know, you can at least deal a good amount of damage to them to where they're like, all right, I need to make this next play count, and then you can disrupt them afterwards. Now, Runecraft and Havencraft, I'll talk about Havencraft first. So, Havencraft is going to be setting up. So they're going to be removing everything off your board. But your late game is better than theirs in the fact of them hiding behind Heavenly Aegis, and you don't need to interact with Heavenly Aegis to win the game. So that's going to be the best part. So you're going to play White Wolf. If they don't remove White Wolf and they go for the Heavenly Aegis play, then realistically you just swing into Heavenly Aegis if they don't ward it. If they do ward it, then you're looking good. If they don't, then you're like, all right, well, what am I gonna do now? But with the White Wolf, it's very good into the Heavenly Aegis. You can hit Rose Queen potentially off of it, turn all those fairies into burn targets, burn them for the rest of their life, and that's the end of the game. Runecraft, when we talk about Runecraft, there's 2 different decks that we have to watch out for. Earthright. So that mid game is really what you're gonna have to watch out for. Taking those executions to get rid of those Ancient Alchemists. Make sure that you can ping Ancient Alchemists for a lot of their life, and then worry about the ward for them prolonging the game. And to D-shift, you just have to get rid of their penguins, and then make sure that you can disrupt their end game for them taking that second turn. Just don't put yourself in a spot where you're like, hey, I have the option, but I don't have the play points for it. Never put yourself in that option after turn 6 for Runecraft, because they're gonna be setting up. But hopefully in the future, D-shift isn't really like fast enough to get you on like turn 6 or 7. They'll probably do their turn like 8, 9. But 6 and 7 turns, just be careful and pay attention to what their spell chain is, and you should be golden. Alright, let's talk about the bad matchups. So, the bad matchups, on the other hand, are Abysscraft and Dragoncraft. Let's talk about Abysscraft first. So, Abysscraft isn't as bad if you have Archer, but if you don't run into Archer, you're not looking good 100%, because Abysscraft can get under you very quickly. While you're setting up, Abysscraft is punching you in the face and in the stomach, and it does not feel good. So you have to make really good values off your plays, and you have to, really pray that you hit that Archer. And that's what the Angelic Snipes to help you for, so you can, draw your cards and then still snipe cards. And it feels pretty good to 100% see Abysscraft crumble after turns 5 and 6. They're running out of cards to do, but the later on in the turns that they are getting stronger plays. So that's the scary part. Now, Dragoncraft, on the other hand, I don't really know the remedy on to beat Dragoncraft, because it just feels so bad. Because you're hitting turn 1, and then they're hitting their turn 2, and they're a turn ahead of you. And that never feels good when someone's a turn ahead of you. And they just make so much value off of playing 1 Dragon Oracle. And then that doesn't even take the fact that they can play more things to ramp, or you have Forte. I mean, you can hit Forte. I can't even think of a card with Rush in Forestcraft right now. I'm just struggling on the fact that Dragoncraft is just so good. Like, the Dragoncraft just has all the options in the world. And when we talk about it in the next video, I'm gonna enjoy speaking on the fact that Dragoncraft is just so strong. I'm glad that it's not, the only deck that you see in tournaments, but Dragoncraft is just strong. If you know what Dragoncraft does, it's just too strong for Forest. Forest can have options, but I can't think of what Forestcraft can do. Guys, drop a comment below and help me, some theorycraft some ideas to beat Dragoncraft, because it is possible. It is possible, but it's very hard. It's very hard for Forest, because I sit down across from Dragoncraft and I'm like, man, they're a turn ahead of me. They're gonna drop Shenlong. They're gonna drop Forte, and I'm just gonna take a whole bunch while I'm sitting here trying to figure out how I'm gonna beat this deck. So, but it's possible for Forestcraft to beat Dragons. So it's just one of the worst matchups. I'd probably say it is the worst matchup out of all of them. So let's talk about the honorable mentions for Forestcraft. So these cards I feel like are pretty good. We have Okami. Whenever you put a card onto the field, give this follower +1/+1, and the fact that he's already a 5/5. So you drop this on turn 4. If you're running the fairy pixie line, you're gonna be dropping those big fairies along with Okami giving the +1/+1, and that's your opponent dealing with like a potential, you only need to drop 3 things after this, and he's an 8/8. Like, that's a problem. that's scary. So, Okami paired with like free bodies is pretty good. Then we have Fairy Beast. So people really don't play this card, but it's actually pretty good to help with the heal. So on 5, you can just banish a Pixie Follower in your EX area and give your later +3 and draw a card. So the exact opposite of what the Enverse does. And then you can only do it once. But for 5 to heal once well, heal 3, and then draw a card is pretty good, and you can only do it once per turn. So if you're not really hitting the Rose Queen line, then you can run Fairy Beast. Now, Wood can curse. This is very good. Now, it doesn't select, it says select, so you can't select anything with Aura, so there's no way you're stopping Forte. But you can select an enemy following the field, and it cannot deal damage this turn. So if there's a huge Genesis Dragon, I'm going to tap 2, and he's not dealing 10 damage to me, so it feels good. So let's give us the overview for Forestcraft. So Forestcraft has the tools to do anything that it wants to do. If I want to buff my guys up, I can do that. If I want to heal, I can do that. If I want to cycle my cards that I've already played on the field, I can do that. And then I have a good late game and a good mid game. So Forestcraft has tools. And they're like, hey, I don't like that guy. I'm going to craft my whole entire turn of removing that guy. Or, hey, I want to do a lot of damage to you. Or if I want to set up my board, I'm going to craft my entire turn of doing that. But unlike Sword, I'm going to have to use multiple cards to do that. And unlike Sword, you only have the one card, that being Floral Fencer. Shout out Floral Fencer. But, Forestcraft has tools, and I will always say that it has a flexibility of doing whatever it wants for a turn. It can ward up, it can keep its defenses up, it can heal itself. So that we do a great system for every raid that we do for a breakdown. And we're gonna give Forest A. We give Forest an A because it's not the best deck. It is the slept on deck, but that does not mean, just because you're sleeping on the deck does not mean the cards aren't powerful. So the cards are still good, the late games. Now the mid to late game, I guess is linear to you guys, since hey, Rose Queen is their strongest card. That is true, but Rose Queen will still do what Rose Queen does and burns you. But it's not one of those top end decks that are like, hey, Swordcraft for example. I'm going to play my 1/1 guys, my 2/2 guys, and then those turns onwards, it's going to be a mixture of me generating value. And you generating value in Forestcraft is, hey, I can't search out what I want, unlike Swordcraft. But I'm going to be drawing cards, and I pray that I see it. And for decks like that, we give a pretty good. I'd give it an A+. It's just not at the tier where we want it to be for S. But it is still, you can still win a regional. You can still top. So any deck that's an A can still top. So thank you guys so much for watching the Forestcraft breakdown. We only have one more breakdown. Thank you for staying loyal and watching the rest of these, even though I've been butchering some words on some of these cards. But I appreciate and love you guys. Make sure you guys are safe in whatever you do for tonight, and safe whatever you do for the rest of the year. I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.
I gave you all my love, baby, my heart is cold when you're around. You warm it up, liquid gold, baby, yeah, you warm it up, liquid gold, baby, and my affection, all that paper you wasted. Take my love.